where that Echo was, but it's not going to matter. Kirk on the flank finds it down onto one. Riot's already down, so it's a technical 1 versus 2. And Bry just swung to his death. Twizzler on the top floor will look to retrieve their teammates, but a Kirk can find the timing and clutch it out. An ace for Kirk.
But Spider still gets a kill, and an Extra not ready for in the corner, but oh my goodness, he gets the kill anyways!
He gets the kill, Teddy left alive. He does it yet again for Mirage!
He's low on health, especially when the Vulcan canisters are in play, but now Ambi low as well, but he takes the kill anyways! He's still left, but with 15 seconds and not too much intel as to where they are, it's not looking great for him, but he's just got the isolated frag on an aim key, and the last one's left in Freezer. This could be a very easy pick to find if he just looks in the right corners with the shotgun as well. He'll be lethal in the close range! A 1-on-2 for the Gridlock!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to XGS Season 7. We are on Playday 6 now, the first Playday here on Week 2 for Season 7. My name, of course, is Swan, joined today by the wonderful Goose. How are you feeling, Goose? I was saying, how can you not be excited? How can you not be excited in the day and age of Rainbow Six Siege here with XGS? More importantly, the standings overall that we have for our tournament so far. We're looking at Group A here first. Group A is a little bit more top-heavy in comparison to Group B here. You have SSGA CAD, the MKERS, kind of holding down the fort in those top 2 spots. And for the Mormon Battalion and down, they're in relatively close succession. It seems we're resolving some technical difficulties real quick, so you're going to get to hear me yap more, which is wonderful. But yeah, SSGA CAD and, of course, the MKERS, 2 star teams that we've had in Season 7 so far, and they've obviously been doing excellent. Good pronouncing on my words today. But from the Mormon Battalion down, like I was talking about earlier, it's a little bit of a closer show that we've been having. All of these teams are really, really close together. We've seen some great games so far, with the exception of the Fluffy Aimers. Not that their game wasn't great, it's just they haven't quite played as much as everyone else. It's been a little bit rough on the scheduling side, some matches not quite working out, but the Fluffy Aimers have been kind of up in the air, and I think we're actually going to get to see them finally play today to get some more information out on them.
Yeah, once we go into the actual matchup, it's going to be very interesting, especially, again, we talked about after Element 3, after pretty much every T2 event, we really get that roster shift, and we've seen that, going into Group B with teams like you'll see hopefully soon. Carnico, Aerial Arise have really dived under the radar for what we expect out of them, especially because both Aerial Arise 1 and 3 and then Carnico 1 and 2, but not to take too much away from other teams. For example, the Unks, not necessarily coming out of nowhere, but not a lot of expectations, and definitely a lot of people not expecting them to be the very first seed, right above Thrive and Chalk It. And then you got Carnico again doing bad, but able to make their way up, squeezing right into 5th.
So you're kind of talking about how there's some teams that snuck under the radar, but the Unks kind of did the opposite of they did their best to light every flare, send out every smoke signal. They have been, the only way to put it is absolutely destroying this tournament so far. Of the Unks, who was a team that I personally not heard of, kind of came out to present me with greatness. So far, they've dethroned some of the greatest teams in XGS, and they're continuing to carry on that glory. I don't know, I'm pretty sure they're down 1 game so far. I'm not quite sure who they lost to. I'd have to go find it. But nonetheless, they have been having an excellent showing throughout XGS so far.
Yeah, it's just really exciting. And speaking of exciting, we have MKERS and Fluffy Aimers. A quick little fact that is going to change a lot of the perspectives of this matchup is that MKERS and Fluffy Aimers just plays in the closed qualifiers for the recent wildcard restart event, where Fluffy Aimers beat MKERS 2-0, 7-1, and 7-2, absolutely washing them. One of the main problems is Kobe has been absent for about a week and a half now, and we're starting to really see that bleed into the performance of MKERS, especially more in recent.
Yeah, having a consistency with your roster, especially with a player like Kobe, who we all know very well, is not only a great individual player, but somebody that can be kind of a glue and a mesh for a lot of teams to help them work together and kind of be that voice of reason and that spokesman for here are the things we need to do to be successful. Having that gone and having that inconsistency for, like you said, just over a little bit of a week is really, really rough on a team. So maybe they've sorted some of these things out. Maybe they're taking a look at the Fluffy Aimers and going, okay, we know what happened in these 2 games, and now that we're in this best of 1 matchup, it's time to fix those errors where it really matters most.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of errors, we got to see what teams will actually be seeing today, what players will be seeing in the first. It's going to be MKERS. Not only do they have an above average attacking win rate being at 59%, but defense 69, not exactly horrible, but for a team like MKERS, you do perhaps maybe see it in the mid to high 70s. But you're gonna have Hitman, Packer, Gideon, Bino. In replace of Kobe for today is going to be Adam. He did, like I said before, played with MKERS in the recent restart closed qualifiers, so he has been able to mesh with them. He's a flexible player too, plays that hardened flex role, so he's going to be able to slot into this team very comfortably and hopefully help them get a win today.
And that's kind of what you were touching on earlier, right? Of after every couple events or so, where something might happen, and a lot of these rosters, you kind of have that shuffle the deck moment of, okay, who are we slotting in? Who are we slotting out? And having a player like Adam to be able to slot in for Kobe is great. Obviously, you said he's played with them since the wildcard restart tournament, and with that, it's definitely showing that there's potentially some comfortability here on this roster that they may have struggled with even while missing Kobe still. But on the side of the Fluffy Aimers, there are still more players to find. It's going to be JJ Blast, Deity, Rival, Recited, and Emilio. And I know that you were particularly excited to talk about Recited.
Yeah, I just really love him as a player. All the way in BGS, Fluffy Aimers were really fighting to get him on the roster. I won't go into, details, but just know that JJ specifically wanted this one player out of everyone else after Element 3 having a little bit of a shaky showing, falling out of there before playoffs that, started to mix up the roster, and this one player has now what is now a solid roster position, and again, a 50% attacking win rate, a 67% defensive win rate. Again, it's a little bit low for these upper echelon teams, but keep in mind, Fluffy Aimers, these stats are from the only game they played. This is their second game of the entirety of Season 7. So it's going to be a little bit skewed compared to the stats of MKERS, but we got to get into the actual head-to-head stats.
True, courtesy of production here, we have a breakdown between Packer and Recited, and there was a very specific reason that me and you picked up these couple of players to analyze here, and that is that they are both absolute fiends when it comes to getting into the building and securing kills for their team. We pull them because of how great they are on that entry. We look at Packer, and obviously Packer is just one of those players where he does an exceptional job at making sure that he gets into the building and plays those trades. He really doesn't care if he has to die for it. He's making sure the space on the objective is contained, being able to lock down areas, and kind of being that flag bearer for his team to get in on the site. And as an entry, he's done a great job so far at doing that.
Yeah, the one problem with Packer, though, is he is a lot of the time the main person shooting in the lobby, and that entry percent having a 6 and 8 and only a 20% or 27% survival rate does hurt them a lot. MKERS' most recent matchup on Nighthaven Labs, again Outlast Black, I believe, was a little bit shaky because rounds where you didn't have Packer in the last 30 to 45 seconds, doesn't matter if they were on defense or attack, they lost those rounds because they didn't have that extra firepower. So the fact that Packer does have a little bit of trouble staying alive into that late round, especially without Kobe, that player who's just notorious good at shutting down rounds and closing out rounds, it really does lack for them. And MKERS, again, the continued theme of banning Nighthaven Labs because they had a little bit of a shaky time last time.
Say on top of Labs, we're going to see many other maps go in succession. Bank, Consulate, Skyscraper, Chalet, Club, they are all out. We will not be seeing our first layered game today either. Border's going to fall to this wayside, leaving us to a very consistent map for what it seems to be only this season of XGS so far. But Cafe has been played a ton this season, Goose.
Yeah, it's definitely been played. And I believe it's been played at least once or twice every playday so far this season. But again, MKERS, every single time they play a match, not only is Lair banned, but they are the team that bans it, including all the way into a wildcard restart. They have just refused to play it. And it is a little bit curious. It really goes back to the idea of, maybe are they hiding strats or they simply just not know how to play it yet? Because not only is Lair such a new map, but it's a newer map to the competitive scene. Not only us as casters and viewers are figuring out, but players are also figuring out to play it at such a high level. So a team like MKERS, giving it a little bit more time to really introduce into the format, especially now that we're going back to 6-6. And now, because of that, we're going to a very familiar map, that being Cafe. Not only have MKERS and Fluffy Amers play this a lot in recent, including in Element 3, just every team has. It's just a very familiar map, not only because it's been in the pool for so long, but again, as you said, it's been played so many times in this last week and a half.
And credit where credit's due, I think it's kind of perfectly catered to something we were talking about for both of these teams, and that is having that force and power behind your entries. Cafe is one of those maps where, for the attacking side, it's kind of hard to gain some ground unless you have good entries that are able to clear that space for you. Look at areas like Piano, even look into Small Bake, that area of Prep Room. There's so many areas on this map where you kind of just have to bend the arm of the defense and trying to force your way through. So for both these teams, it's going to be a great showing so far of how they're going to utilize those entry players we're talking about to execute on that. But what operators they'll be playing is a different question as we get into bans here.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity for MKERS to get their revenge. Even though it's just a best of one today, they still are able to potentially knock Fluffy Amers down just a couple of notches, making them go 1-1 throughout Season 7 after they lost 0-2 and were kicked out of the wildcard tournament. Capital, though, a little bit surprising. I understand the theory of banning it out, eliminating an operator that can really essentially just eliminate certain positions around the map, push defenders out of their hardened positions, most likely on, specifically Cafe, or sorry, not Cafe, but Bakery.
There she is.
Yeah, and then Valkyrie on top of it. So aside from the Capital, this is relatively what you would expect for a Cafe.
Yeah, losing that out, I think it's been played and picked up by a lot more teams in recent. Those asphyxiating bolts as well of those smokes are kind of proving themselves, especially in the day and age of these bunker comps that we've been seeing on a map like Cafe. Especially, you lose out on the mirror, so you're going to have to supplement that with deployable shields, maybe pushed up on VIP, potentially having one defending areas like Skylight. And so taking that out is honestly a really, really smart and good look into the future of what the plan may be for them. Nonetheless, we're going to see the Valkyrie taken off the board too, and I think last time I checked, she had a 93% ban rate this season, so a lot of teams looking to control that information game. The MKERS starting off on defense here, and they're going to be starting at a little bit of a unique site. Typically, we see a lot of teams go top floor or down in that kitchen area, and instead they've gone reading.
Yeah, I really love how reading has come into play more for the defense on Cafe, especially because mining is just kind of one of those bomb sites. Not as much, as like bar inside of Clubhouse, but a lot of teams do try to avoid it. If you don't have to play it, if you're able to play this middle floor over in reading and dining, potentially even go upstairs to bar and cocktail, it's all the better, because just defending mining is a really hard site. And with this bomb site, you really force the attacking team to essentially clear the entire building. The top floor is just so much emphasis, you can't really work the windows over by mining, so you're forced to not only clear the entire top floor, but you could potentially have a couple of those nasty little rat angles below from those defenders. So you just really got to worry about all three floors. It makes it just even more difficult for the attacker to get into the building.
Speak of the devil, they are making it difficult indeed. A nade toward the white stairs, trying to force out Packer. It's contact with the Deimos down by that service entrance. And these early gunfights are kind of the specialty of Cafe. The rest of the Fluffy Amers are going to be trying to make their way into the top floor. Giddy, first to fall to the 417 DMR. Hitman with a trade, but Resident's going to pick up his duel against Packer on that bottom floor as well. One-man advantage now for the Fluffy Amers. Still trying to take that vertical control. The Monty making his way into the building, and he's much closer to site than I think the MKERS would have expected.
Yeah, that is really tough. Not only to lose those two players, but more specifically to lose Packer. Again, I talked about how he does so much, especially in the late game, but also losing all of that smoke utility that Monty for now will not be a threat, but he is going to try to get that bomb down, and they've essentially just executed Dino from the entire round.
JJB able to stick that plant. Rival finding the headshot onto Adam, but this is what you get when you don't fully clear that vertical. Hitman is still all the way upstairs. Recited, be dueling with Vino on his own down in that bottom floor. T5 SMG, great free fire potential. Emilio to take out Hitman on the top floor. That's the vertical pressure removed, and to be honest, what can you really do? Trapped in the whiskey bar, held by the Deimos. The diffuser's upstairs. It's the first round. On the side of the defense. Attack, rather. Good words.
It's really fun to see Fluffy Aimers, especially after Element 3 in specific, and just to see how good they've gone. They really have been a top contending team, simply just knocking out of all their opponents. Really, before Element 3, their only two opponents were MKERS and Aerial Rise, beating BGS 3-1, or sorry, beating Aerial Rise and BGS 3-1, and then again recently beating MKERS 2-0. And Fluffy Aimers, in my opinion, in recent, the past week, have really solidified themselves as one of, if not the best, T2 team, especially again bringing in a player like Recited, who's really been undervalued and underused in a lot of his teams. So not only is he be able to get his moment to shine, but he's also a player that not only impacts in the kill department, but impacts really letting his teammates run into whoever want. You saw him specifically on the Deimos go down below. He essentially said, you don't have to worry about this Legion. I'll 1v1 and I'll keep him trapped like he's in Guantanamo Bay in the first floor, and you guys can worry about getting that bomb down. He's a great entry player, and he's so good because he just makes his teammates' jobs even more easy.
Ease of use on the attack definitely was the name of the game there. They effectively walked into sight and got that diffuser down. He completely locked down the bottom floor. I'm sorry, that completely caught me off guard. The MKERS, though, going to be trying to change it up, heading down to Kitchen. Trying to find that change of pace, but what they're going to run into is potentially that vertical pressure coming through, although the attacking lineup not really suited for it. Instead, going for a more horizontal take. Opening up that Christmas window, looking into VIP, trying to force out this position of Whiskey Bar and potentially coat a little early in this round, and then see what they can work from there.
Yeah, Fluffy Aimers is doing a great job just utilizing these shields, even though at the moment they're currently not in use. As soon as Fluffy Aimers find a gap, as soon as they find an entry point into the map,
oh, he's
talk
so
about
dead.
Entry point. Oh, there you go. Recited.
Oh, what?
Hitting Bino, but almost dying at the same time.
He spun around so fast to catch those bullets from the player in Freezer, but JJB walked up on the frost. Emilio picking off the kill into Freezer. Gonna be the lurk down brown stairs from Adam, though, and now he's behind all of them. The Fluffy Aimer still holding on to that man advantage, but as I say that, the scale quickly tumbles to the other side. The MKERS completely shutting down the Fluffy Aimers here. Adam having a round of all time. Good flank down the brown stairs. The shields tried to hit the side a little bit quicker than they were expecting, but the MKERS were able to lock it down.
That's exactly what MKERS need. We can talk about all of these in-deep strats, these in-deep theory ideas of Siege and how MKERS could potentially win the game. But if you don't have that player that can just simply shoot the opponents, shut down those positions, prevent those pushes like we just saw him do, you're simply not going to win a game. We saw a little bit of it with Packer in their last matchup on Nighthaven Labs. But again, because he was able to be dealt with so early on in so many rounds, it allowed them to go 7-5 against a team they really shouldn't have been that close with. So if we could have more players, if it is going to continue to be Adam or maybe another player on MKERS that shows up that can really shut down those aggressive playstyle, those aggressive pushes from Fluffy Aimers, it's going to continue to ride in success. But if we don't see those plays, I'm really questioning what else MKERS really have to give a Fluffy Aimers a difficult time on this cafe.
Yeah, really great positioning, and more importantly, some great timing there from Adam. That was a huge timing there to get behind that attack as they were aggressing. But we're going to take it to the top floor now. Adam may be having a hard time recreating this greatness because his top floor, you don't really have that many avenues in. You're either trying to force your way up the stairways or drop those hatches. So the Fluffy Aimers most likely going to have to work the windows here. The Azami not being banned. meaning that Piano is going to be that much harder to get into. Starting to open the hatches. The Monty heading up to that top red as well, potentially trying to work that move in towards Cigar and force the Sazami out.
Again, you talked about those difficult positions around the map, but there's Adam shutting down Recited again, trying to push and get that control early on, but he's actually dealt with early on. Not only that, but Giddy is still allowed to not only reside in this position, but continue to put up even more and more barricades. And with that, with Recited being down, that's your mid-floor control gone, putting Fluffy Neighbors on the back foot and forced to really change up their style.
To let them in red, MKERS, and it's going to be a problem for you now. AK-12 around the corner. Rival finding the head. Hacker. Hitman to trade JB in return, but now the Fluffy Aimers have an issue. Gotta force their way in. Piano still spots that player out toward bathroom. There is going to be the information on them, and they don't have a ton of utility to not only clear the Sazami barricade, but then get past the choke point of bathroom. Rival trying to relieve some of that pressure. Able to pick up another. No diffuser in hand. Still in the body of the Monty. Deity taking down Giddy. Now they're just waiting. Trying to find their moment. Bino walking up close. He flicks to the doorway trying to find two, but it's instead going to be a third for Rival. Finally taken down by Adam, the man of the hour. 4K last round. 2 on this one. Refires the head holes. Gets caught through the bar. He's on 10 HP, but Fluffy Deity's on 15 himself. Both these players so low. No diffuser in the hand of the Twitch. Make himself out too. Good pre-fire in the doorway just at the wrong time. Catches the swing, but it's Deity to be aware. Either heard the footsteps or had the read, but nonetheless, Adam only good for 6 so far in this game.
MKERS, in that first little point of the map, were able to shut down that aggressive solo entry from Musaidid. And then after that, the Fluffy Aimers players, they used that as somewhat of a distraction to taking a majority of control over by Piano. Hacker, again, being that entry player. Because he was shut down, that essentially opened up this entire side of the map for them to take. And Fluffy Aimers, every time they go into a gunfight, there's usually 2 to 3 behind them, unless you're Deity and you're forced into a 1v1 and you just simply have a better gun. But MKERS, they're going to opt to go back down to this reading and kitchen bomb site and try and maybe have a little bit of a better time. Last time around, their overall strat didn't work a whole lot. You know, the idea was relatively fine. It was simply just giving that really big gap up. Losing those 2 players essentially allowed JJ on the Monty just find his way easily onto site, and then you had Recited just essentially put Bino on skates on the first floor, essentially just cutting him off from the entirety of the team. A lot of mistakes made, but this is a chance for MKERS to fix those mistakes and for Adam to continue to hopefully thrive.
Adam is having a very good game so far. Rival having a little bit of a round last round, picking up 3, and it's that kind of greatness that might get them in the objective itself here again. No Monty this time for the attack. Moving away from those shields. They've been very, very strong throughout pretty much ever since their chains. You can run around with them, you can knock these players down, really get in their face, and for the MKERS who were taking their contact fight to last round on this map, on this site rather, having those shields in their face really, really slowed them down. Opening up that wall in pillars, some early round pressure, but the world really kind of standing still here as the MKERS are just waiting for the Fluffy Aimers to make their move.
The main entry point that Fluffy Aimers are focusing on is that top floor, specifically that skylight, trying to find an entry, but Adam finds his way onto JJ's head for the very first opening, picking it for another!
He simply can't be stopped. Rival to pick up the trade. Deity close behind him picks up Hitman and Piano, and now the top floor is in the hands of the Fluffy Aimers. MKERS is going to have a situation to deal with downstairs. They're going to clear this utility, drone it out, and start working their way to that bottom floor. Emilio is going to make that job even easier, finding the kill onto Packer, working this pillar position. Not sure if he's aware that the Legion's all the way over in train, but still, this is so much sight control for the Fluffy Aimers.
I mean, the MKERS, they continue to give these isolated gunfights and more specifically allow these isolated attackers from Fluffy Aimers to just thrive and get these picks, but eventually, Bino! Followed up by Kitty! What?
Did they they just not realize they droned him on white, did they not? I mean, talk about right place at the right time there for Giddy to drop the hatch, and he's just gonna snatch them up in the meantime. But I I swear they caught him on drone. I have no clue how he was able to really get away with that. Adam on this top floor hold, by the way, as we catch that replay. No right to pick up 2 there. Getting 1 is perfect for him. He did his job to the nth degree. Hold the top floor, get a pick, and then the ability to swing red there and pick up another is absolutely excellent from him there. Flawless work from him on the top floor. But the MKERS picking up their second round there off the Fluffy Aimers.
It is a little bit worrying. I guess you could say it's one of those rounds. It is still relatively early in the game. You can chalk it up to just simply really overestimating your intel game, what you think you know the positions of your opponents, and because of that, you just allowed a very big gap that eventually shut down the entirety of the round. But we saw Fluffy Aimers, they have 2-round wins, and that is in part to MKERS just simply letting their defenders, more specifically the roamers, be so isolated. But Adam could potentially get a fast one, but he's going to get nothing out of it, and surely should hold back before he loses his life, as he has probably been the most important player, especially on the kill and entry board for MKERS. You definitely want to save his life just a little bit longer.
He's been so hungry, and obviously that spawn peak proves it. He just wants more from the Fluffy Aimers. He is asking them, begging them to give him a gunfight right now. Fluffy Aimers, though, not going to have as much of a contest on this top floor. With it being in kitchen, it's really a lot of second floor verticality that these defenders try and work, and even so, it's going to be mostly for free. Recited going to be playing that top floor position, kind of being that anchor player we saw him be last time, where he locked down that Legion in Whiskey Bar, but the Fluffy Aimers so far, just working it top down.
Yeah, I really love how they're just simply taking it slow. They're not trying to overstep their welcome like they did with that Monty in Blitz push. They're just simply trying to work this vertical, trying to get as much control from above, try to put as much pressure so you can't have those hardened positions on the sites. Essentially just entirely just defend the site, make sure that the attackers can't even enter the site. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're making sure that they open up the site. They make the site the unsafest place. I thought Recited was a defender with a shotgun there for a little bit.
For a second, I was fooled.
If you look at the Christmas position, it's completely vacated. All you have is 2 players over by bar. And the Fluffy Aimers, if they're able to realize this could be a relatively easy position to take control of.
Yeah, Fluffy Aimers just taking a lot of space on the second floor, but for the MKERS, they've just woven their way into the cracks of the site that can't be hit by the vertical right now. It's the player position in Whiskey. Giddy trying to make his way upstairs and retake that vertical, though. Remove that thorn from the side of the Fluffy Aimers. Even if he dies here, he's gotten his one, but still playing patient and just burn time off the clock. The ace. Couple of shots toward that case. He is just lying in wake. Should be known. Emilio to walk up behind him, though. He's only going to be good for the one, and it's back to the vertical for the Fluffy Aimers. But still, they have so much space to work through on this bottom floor that's yet to be really contested. Bino spotted out on that shield. It's going to be the rotate all the way down to the service entrance. A bounce nade, and then he's shot in the back by Emilio coming down Brown, and Adam is going to have a wall of attackers ahead of him any second. 30 seconds left on the clock, and they've got to make their move. Adam sprays down Emilio. Looking for another. Knows he should be in code. It's 2 for Adam on the round. He needs to go huge here again. His teammates still just playing in the objective, locking down the site. Hacker and is shut down, Recited in the meantime. Adam's still near code. Flicks toward the sink side. He's caught in no man's land. It's the rotate hold. Flicks back, but Adam for 3 and a great hold from the MKERS there to absolutely remove the Fluffy Aimers off of this map.
I mean, talk about a heat-up game, specifically for Adam. I believe in the last 3 rounds, he's either gone, or actually 3 to 4 rounds, he's either gone 4, 3, or 2 kills, never really hovering below that 2 kill mark, and he's continuing to show why he's such a useful and an impactful player, and that's really what they were lacking last weekend, in that wildcard tournament. That's why they lost 2-0 in such a definitive fashion to MKERS, because he didn't relatively show up in that entry position. And now that he is showing up, we can really see that Fluffy Aimers, they don't really have a great time clearing him out. That's probably Their biggest problem right now is simply just clearing out Adam. Not only that he's getting kills, but he's always slipping by the lines of sight. All the drone economy that's being used by Fluffy Aimers, they simply can't find him. He's kind of like that cockroach under the floors. He's always in the worst possible spot at the worst possible time. He's going to continue to strike if they don't start focusing on him.
And as much as the strategy's been great for Makers, Adam has had huge impact over the last few rounds. And to be honest, nobody on the Fluffy Aimers is really having the same effect so far. Adam right now is going to be the sole pillar of fragging potential for his team, at least so far. He really hasn't given much of anyone a chance, but Fluffy Aimers haven't quite found that spark yet, and Adam's going to be looking for even more. They should spot his barrel out of the window there. A good pre-fire is going to force him to head away, and as we come back to the top floor, Fluffy Aimers, once again, not bringing the Monty. Making Red's going to be a little bit harder as they're going to start to work the information game.
Yeah, they're really opting to use these cutoff operators like the Nomad to prevent those positions from being rotated or flanked, rather. Adam, though, is looking for a jump out. How does he keep doing it?
I simply cannot be stopped. I'm going to hop out of the window. That's the kill onto Emilio. JJB to fall in the meantime. Recited to go as well. And now, for the Makers, you can sit pretty on site. It's Deity and Rival. Rival had picked up 3 kills with this AK-12 on this site, so don't count him out yet. But still, separated from his teammates, 3 defenders pinned on him. They know exactly where he is, but he's so aware of this flank too. It's just coming from the other side instead. Deity should hear the Fenrir wall here. Lurking through pillar.
Fluffy Aimers, these last 2 players looking for absolutely anything. They have a plethora of time on the board, 1 minute and 30. Both players doubled up, trying to find Adam, and that's exactly what they do. And now they can isolate these last 2 defenders to try to hopefully win this round.
Deity pushing up, trying to take the space. Packer finds the headshot onto Rival. He flicks around to look for the other, but he's not quite able to line his crosshairs up in time. Trying to take that space there is actually going to be to your detriment. Your teammates get shot in the back, and now that diffuser has no chance of going down. But a great attempt nonetheless, considering Adam and the rest of the Makers at the start of that round had a spectacular show of force to try and force them away from the objective before it even started.
It is really beautiful how not only has Adam showed up, but he's essentially slotted in doing the role that we saw Kobe and Packer do. Kobe played that role of being that primary entry player, just shutting down those opening picks, and you had Packer, more specifically on the defense, who would always fall on that back line to be the player that shuts down those rounds, shut down those last straggling attackers in the last 30 to 15 seconds. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Adam and Packer here. Sure, Packer's only going through because those 3 kills are so impactful and allow for more openings for his teammates. And now translating onto the attack, we can see that Packer is continuing to fill that role, going onto the Monty, continuing to be that space gapper. He finds the space, fills it, and then relays the information to his team.
Be a 4-2 split here between the Makers and the Fluffy Aimers, and it's not the worst in the world. Closable gap for sure for the Fluffy Aimers, but they're going to have to kind of really get a good read on what the Makers want in this first attack so far, right? We know how they played on defense. Adam was kind of that player to find those gaps, lurk in, but for the rest of the Makers attack, is it going to be an incredibly quick hit? And with the Monty, I have a feeling it's going to be a very similar setup on this reading site to what we saw the Fluffy Aimers themselves bring on their attack.
Curious thing though is Packer is most likely going to use this Monty as essentially a sledgehammer, just trying to drive his way, trying to find those picks and give rather the planting opportunity to Bino. So a little bit of a distraction rather. And this is, notoriously how Packer has played Monty before. But more specifically, it's going to be up to Adam not only to find his way into those entry picks, but also open up that vertical. He needs to make sure that he saves his life and doesn't lose it too early on, trying to get those opening picks. A lot to do here. Not a lot of time.
Benefit of the Monty there. He's going to walk out. Adam quickly swings off that information, the pre-fire onto Rival. You pick up that man advantage. Now working your way across. A great headshot from Giddy. Almost catching the head of Adam as well. Gonna have to retreat. Deity. Drained into no man's land. That Monty kind of forced him out. Bino, being aware of that flank, takes down Resided, and now it's a 5v1. Emilio, you have been left to your own devices. You have to fend off every single remaining attacker. Headshot onto Adam on the hatch, but the Monty's going to be in his face, and what do you really do there? You've got the rectangle of doom running down white stairs. It can't be stopped.
And you know, we're really seeing the form of how MKERS played previously. You know, this last weekend tournament doesn't seem like it phased them a whole lot. And they now have a potential to go up 4-0 in groups and not solidify their position, but give themselves in a very comfortable spot on the top of that throne. But again, just having that player like a Kobe, like an Adam, to just let players like Packer, like Gideon, Bino play freely and do their job, not having to worry about trying to compensate for losing those entry picks, it really does make the entirety of the team's jobs just that much easier. It gives them more time to focus on their goals in the round and just increases the capability and the cohesion of team play overall. And this is exactly what MKERS have been missing in the absence of Kobe recently.
Redeeming factors, kind of filling those slots like you said, and Adam's doing the perfect job. The trade game there was really, really impressive, and almost, I would honestly say, a masterclass. You have the Monty push in, Adam was sitting right behind him. You leave Giddy to his own devices to find one. Beautiful, beautiful work on that take. But I am a little bit perplexed, as I believe there should be other objectives ups, and they're going to head to mining instead. And line up of the attack is going to have that Monty again, which means should mean easy space on the red or white stairs.
This time around, Fluffy Gamers, they're not going to bring a pulse that you do commonly see here quite a bit, and rather they're going to bring that Solus out. But with the removal of that impact, JJ, he's going to bring that shotgun, so he's going to still be able to relay the information, but still perhaps play spoilers from below if they do go and try and plant inside of mining itself. But for now, he's playing the site, just trying to lock it down, making sure it's not free for the taking, stopping that very aggressive early on rush into the site. The flood, some would rather say, for MKERS. And for now, MKERS, they're going to do exactly what they did last time, worrying about that top floor, getting control, applying pressures, and really pushing those players on top into more uncomfortable positions rather.
The Fluffy Gamers have a bunker up here. Resided has had no pressure on him. They spent a minute and a half, it seems, on the roof, and they're going to finally drop in the skylight on the other side. Rival retreating towards Stack. His teammate JJB is going to be taken down instead. Giddy picks up this trade, but it's going to quickly be taken back again, once again by Adam. Trying to hold on to that man advantage. Resided trying to do his best as a flurry of trades going back and forth. He has to contend with the Monty. Go to flick onto the headles, though. Picks up the head of Bean. An Echo drone to support him. Adam doing work on the other side of the map. The Echo, still alive, has to fight him. Catches the shoulder of Packer. It is ridiculous work here from Resided on the top floor. He's spotted outside, but it doesn't matter, because Adam is in the objective on the mid floor. Case left to its own devices on the top floor, and now Adam has to find two players with a lack of information and a lack of support from his team.
No bomb on top of that, and even if Resided loses his life, you still have that Echo to play spoilers. No time, no case, absolutely nothing in the favor of Adam. All he has is his gun. He's trying to find a way back into this round.
Heard the air jab go off earlier. Still nowhere to be seen from these defenders. The Diffuser just sitting behind Longbow. He's going to have the opportunity to grab it, but as he's worked his way to the top floor, they've rotated back down. They're on site, lying in wake. Jumping over the railing into pillar. Breach is going to be open, catching some shots from the mining side. Refires the head holes, says he knows there's one close. I don't know if he can read it and doesn't quite fully clear the corner. Rival to shut down our star so far of Adam.
Talk about a hero round for Resided. Finally, he has woken up in this matchup. The question is he going to continue to walk his stride throughout these next couple of rounds? As Fluffy Gamers, they're still not only down 2 rounds, but MKERS, they're only 2 away from taking their 4th regulation win. We've talked about impactful players. We've talked about Adam, and it's Recited finally making a name for himself in that round, getting 3 kills solely in that piano position, eventually being able to make his way out of that window to safety. That was essentially the round over. Now, going into this next attacking round for MKERS Fluffy Hammers, they're going to be set up on this top floor position over by Bar and Cocktail, and we should expect relatively the same bunker hold that we saw last time around in the window game. And again, piano is also going to be a contributing factor. A lot of the mainstay, the main power positions that we saw them attack this round is going to be yet another notion of attack they're going to have to focus on this one.
Attackers are heading out to defuse a bomb.
My only question mark so far for the MKERS is that I think both teams this entire map so far have locked down that piano position on the top floor with Inazami. And while Capitao is man, you could still bring operators like the Flores, maybe potentially bring the Ying in there, slot something out to try and make taking that space easier, because it's been a huge point of contention so far, with the only solution really being Demonte, who still opted to walk out toward red either way.
Yeah, it's just Fluffy Hammers doing a great job of just giving so many obstacles for the MKERS to deal with. And by the time they are even able to get even close and apply pressure onto these power position players, they've just dwindled so much of their useful utility. Air jab will be shot by JJ, but this should allow for MKERS to be aware of his presence. But if you even look at his position, he doesn't even really have an opportunity, but he still finds it!
I thought he was going to run all the way out and look up, and instead he heard Hitman on that around that corner and went for that instead. Really, really good stuff for him. Happy to finally see him get on the board, too. A little bit of a rough game here for JJ, but he's getting in the motion. Maybe this could be the turning point for the Fluffy Hammers. Still trying to deal with this Azami setup on the top floor. Haven't quite found their way in just yet, and it's going to be JJ for his second on the round, all the way over to service. That DMR proving ever so effective in his hands, and to be honest, the MKERS have really hit a wall here. Haven't quite been able to open the tick and breach. You're still contending with this player free-firing through the window, but they're giving you nothing. The Fluffy Hammers know they can just wait for you to have to take the space because the clock is still working against the MKERS, and they don't have much to show for it.
It is a very difficult position, and they don't only have not a lot of time to work with. They don't have a lot of work with whatsoever. They have absolutely no map control. It's going to be a swing in from Adam, but an absolute failure.
My God.
As Resided continues to strive for a third out of this another piano window. What is up with these piano windows?
They are a fan of the windows. I don't know what it is. Adam, Resided, JJ even. I wouldn't count the doors down there necessarily as windows, but it's the runouts in general. The nature of Cafe, I guess, having so many windows, but it was really interesting there from the MKERS. We burned a lot of time trying to force this player out of piano and committing most of our utility there, not really worrying about any other side of the map. And yet they hadn't even obtained much space to show for it whatsoever. And then, of course, this play, when they try to drop down and come in, it's kind of a last-ditch effort. We're going to throw some flashbangs, get in, and pray. I don't know if they were trying to get him through that ticket breach to make sure he was blinded, but still, so much utility, and yet all of it was committed to try to force out Resided to no avail.
Talked a lot about him, and more specifically, previous 2 rounds before we saw them played, MKERS were up 5-2. You wonder what happened in those last 2 rounds? Resided got a whopping 7 kills in between those 2 times that MKERS tried to get into the building, and they always were met with one player solely, that player being Resided, who's continued to be simply a problem for MKERS they have not been able to deal with. I talked about how Fluffy Hammers needed to deal with Adam. This time around, a whole new problem that MKERS didn't really necessarily have to deal with. And a boss cheeks spawn peek onto Adam.
It's just Resided just wants more. He's picked up the Adam treatment. And speaking of losing one player, you're going to lose Adam of everyone off of the MKERS, the person who's been doing so good at those entries so far, and that is a rough go. They're going to still try and work toward this bakery side. Lamonti should allow them to get in relatively easily, but there's still so much utility. The Capcan traps, you've now lost the Grimbees that could potentially find some of these players out, and instead they're going to opt to walk in, but they haven't even started to clear the second floor, and that vertical play is going to be an issue for them.
Yeah, Emilio is the person meeting MKERS at the front board of this bomb site, and if you look at that wall, it's not being opened, and not a whole lot of vertical play being brought out by MKERS. This is a problem that they didn't really try to intake for, and on top of that, Bandit, he's able to fall back down to the site. Absolutely nothing whatsoever being given the way of MKERS. They can't find anything, and not only that, but they have to deal with Deity in such a difficult position. It's going to be Packer trying to make a way for MKERS into this round, into this bomb site.
Gonna have to. Running into 2, the Boss G shot is going to fall just to the side of Hitman. Most of his are going to connect with Resided, though. Deity, the head holds on red, able to pick up the trade. Giddy, rather, to pick up the kill onto Rival, and now it's a gunfight towards the coach side. The man advantage traded back to the Fluffy Aimers. It's all gonna fall quiet. The trade, not quite following up just yet. Giddy knows this player's in coat, catches him on the vault. A good lurk up, got a crossfire set up with his teammate all the way in. Christmas trying to find the bandit through the wall. He's gonna get picked up instead. And now it's Bino. AK-12 in hand, spots that player near the H chassis, but doesn't have a tally just yet on where Emilio has gone. 30 seconds left on the clock. He has Freezer open. That's going to be the avenue for the rotate. Due diligence. Doesn't want to get his ankles blown off in a 1v2 here. Opportunity to stick the diffuser. 20 seconds left on the clock. He has to either go for it or swing, and he's going to hop off in the angles. Perfectly held by JJ there. Good job at making sure they aren't over swinging in that situation, trying to lock it down and not give that round up to the MKERS.
It is really difficult for MKERS because I don't like to say this a whole lot, but aside from Adam, there's not really another player that's really shutting down these gunfights. I mean, sure, every once in a while we'll have a player like Giddy, but there's only 2 players on MKERS who are above 4 kills. And if you look at Fluffy Aimers, you have a new player every time you have a player like maybe Recited is shut down. You have JJ coming out of nowhere in that round on the Bandit, getting a huge 3-piece in that last minute, shutting down, completely closing the opportunities that MKERS were opening after getting those ones, always being there, trading back the kills that they were getting over by that closet hallway. And it's just a really difficult time. It's kind of like a whack-a-mole where the MKERS have found themselves. Every time they deal with a Fluffy Aimers player, a new one pops up and goes off. And it's really hard because you can't really put your focus on one player because another one could just be waiting around that corner.
Heading back to mining here for the Fluffy Aimers, and not only that, but they've now brought this series back to even. The MKERS, with a 2-round lead, are now tied up with the Fluffy Aimers, who are going to be resetting their fortress that Resided held so perfectly on this top floor last time. It's not only that, but the MKERS have got to be feeling it at this point. You've had your couple of round wins, you thought you had the lead, you were putting the Fluffy Aimers on the back foot, but now out of thin air, they are back to even with you as they've put in the work. And while Adam has had a great start so far, he's been getting picked off pretty early into these rounds, and it's been a really rough time for the MKERS to convert those rounds if he's off the board.
I mean, the game right now for MKERS is to not only get into the map itself, but once you get those entry picks, make sure they're not traded back. Make sure you really just snub out these positions. You have Recited playing in piano is really an infinity gauntlet this entire second half of the game. This is a position that they've had to deal with time and time before, and so far, haven't been able to deal with it. Hacker, though, will be back onto that Monty, and in my opinion, they really need to utilize him. There's that sledgehammer, just really forging his way through this defense, through this bunker, all the way on top of piano. But MKERS could potentially see a good jab into the bomb site here.
They're going to completely avoid piano this time. Nitrocell's going to bounce right off that Monty's shield. A peek around the corner from Hitman is going to take out JJB. But more importantly for the MKERS, they've walked in the objective. Now a 5v2, but it is a slaughter from the attacking team that leaves Emilio all on his lonesome. Batting the black, connects one with his shoulder, catches a couple of rounds himself, 85 HP, and he's not expecting Hitman prone in the hallway. It is a flawless round for the MKERS as they say, you know what? you can have an even game. We'll take match point.
I really love Maker's entire solution for taking piano control was, we won't take it. We'll just completely ignore that position. We'll ignore that entire side of the map and just go to hit site. And that's a problem when you have such a bunker defended position around the map that's not the bomb site, is that because you use all of that utility, because you use all of those player lives on that specific position and then have your back players over by white, you leave the bomb site effectively not only empty but defenseless. You know, not a whole lot, not only reinforced walls, but not a whole lot of defender utility preventing those flashbangs, preventing that attacker utility, really just forcing out and applying pressure onto that mute, which was the only driving force, the only thing preventing Makers from getting that bomb down. And they identified that very early on and attacked it also very early on.
10 seconds remaining.
A really good pivot there from the Makers, kind of realizing we've lost this power position and we really can't afford to fight it with the comp that we're bringing on our attack. And they said instead, okay, we're better catered to just try and hit the site. We can fake the pressure upstairs on red, which is a really, really smart idea. Not only that, to drop red to still bring the potential threat of them forcing their way into piano and trying to take that vertical control. Instead, pivoting that all the way towards the objective itself, which, as you mentioned, was effectively free for them here. Adam, as we head to the top floor, is going to be picking up the Amaru of all operators.
It is very questionable, but, you know, there is, you know, kind of an ask of, do you bring in Amaru at this time where you can essentially catch your opponents off guard when they're not necessarily expecting it, or is this probably the worst time to bring it out where you don't really have that buffer? If you lose this round, you're going to force to be playing that overtime solution. It's a question that a lot of teams do ask, and I think putting a player like Adam, who's been so hot throughout this entire game on both halves, especially kind of an unorthodox play, you know, trying to put a lot of pressure onto that piano, trying to make them second guess themselves. And Deity, he still finds Packer!
Traded out, 4v4, it's not all for nothing though. You've taken out the Grim. That's most of the utility that we're going to use to find the players here for Adam. I cannot believe he hits that Claymore, working the piano windows. What was a safe haven is now a kill box. Now move out. Your barricades won't hold forever. He tries to bolt up on the desk, but breaks his barricade in the process. Hitman picks up Presided for free. JJB trying to hold the cross in the freezer, making sure these positions are still held. The windows, it should be open in any second, but Makers have called a reset. They said, okay, we've gotten our few picks. Let's redrone, let's reset, let's get in position here. Adam is still alive. We haven't seen the Gara hook come in yet to get him inside the building, and there's still plenty of time for him to do so, though.
Whole entire minute and 10, but because you're completely restructuring your push onto the bomb site, that allows for Fluffy Emerge to read your attack and also restructure their holds, set up more strong crossfires, and Emilio is going to opt to continue to resign in this position with Bino getting another one.
2v4 to keep them alive, make it a 3v2, down to a 3v1. Good Nitro cell, but still gonna get caught out by the window. It's all up to Rival. Sprays down Bino from long distance. Catches the Amaru pushing close. Does he know she has a hot shotgun? There's no way she does. He doesn't quite find the head, and it's Adam to close things out for the Makers. Fluffy Amers, you tried to recreate that 2-0 we saw in the wildcard series, but instead the Makers have something to say this time. 7-5 favor the attack.
Even though Makers have kept relatively every game throughout this group stage very close, they will continue to go flawlessly, being now a 4-0 record, every single game being won in regulation. And for Fluffy Amers, for their second game, they'll fall down to that even 1-1 mark. And it's going to be a little bit of a more difficult time, as they are probably in one of the more hotly contested groups. And I believe now Makers have at least solidified a play-in spot, having 2 more games left. If they're able to win those next 2, they'll definitely solidify not only the top seed, but playoffs in general. So Makers finally finding exactly the formula that they needed to get a win and get the revenge, even at that, on Fluffy Amers.
And the Makers looked really great overall, despite that little comeback from the Fluffy Amers and that fire they found. I mean, you just saw Resided do something absolutely ridiculous there, as well as JJB kind of coming back into the fray. But credit where credit's due, Adam was 18-8 at the end of that game. He had an absolute heater of a match, and I think that kind of restored the faith in the makers there. Even though they were ahead, and even though they were fine, they had a struggle against fluffy aimers in previous. We talked about that way earlier, so having this pop-off game from Adam is kind of showing, look, it doesn't matter what we do if we mix up the roster. It doesn't matter what changes we make as long as we know that we can trust our teammates. And Adam has proved more than anything that he is trustworthy on the roster of the makers. Great work from him overall.
Yeah, and I think that's not only what they needed, simply just another win against a team that previously beat them, but they really needed a game where they could find a player that they could rely on. You know, that star player, that player that can really shut down those entry positions, put players like Hacker on the back line, make them play their roles more comfortably without having to worry about compensating losing that entry position. And, you know, you knew eventually that makers were going to find their stride, find something while Kobe has been absent, and they found it relatively quickly.
Nonetheless, speaking of quickly, we're going to take a quick break here as we move on to our next match. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere.